It's nice to have a chance to tell you a desert box story. It's a little different telling a story to the camera lens, but I'm thinking of each one of you while I tell my story and hoping you are okay and having a joyful fall, and I'm looking forward to when we get to see each other again. And it will happen. It's coming. Hang in there. So, one different thing about my story this evening, it's not Sunday morning. This is Thursday night. I'm making the recording for Sunday, and it's like 8:30 at night, or maybe almost 9. So it's dark in here, and my candle's going, and it's really kind of peaceful. Try to share that peace with you, but it's really quite nice in here, very peaceful and warm and just great. And that kind of goes along with my story, because my story deals with the desert and stars in the sky and lots of love and God's presence. And it deals with the desert. The desert is a very special place to me. I grew up in the desert, as some of you know, and about a year ago I took a trip to the desert, northern Nevada, where I grew up, and spent a couple days just sightseeing and looking at things. I hadn't been there for a really long time, and I was telling myself over and over how beautiful it was. I miss it. And I'm so glad I got to go, and I spent 2 days by myself there, and the interesting thing was I never felt lonely. I felt like God was out there with me. I was just so touched by how beautiful it was, and I had a great time, and not one little bit of being lonely. So it was very special. So I'm glad I get to tell you a desert box story, because that's special to me. And because it's a really cool story and it deals with stars in the sky, I want to play a little mood music for you first. Just a little. I brought my clarinet. Sometimes when we're together, you all get to look at it, touch the keys and stuff and look, and I'd love to share it with you next time we're together. But for now, I'm going to play just a little piece for you. Hope I get this right. So here goes. I think it's time we start our story. So this is a little piece of desert. It's a little different than the desert I went to go see. This one, lots of sand. But deserts, there's lots of different kinds of deserts on Earth, actually. In this particular desert, lots of sand. And we're going to talk about it. So here goes. The desert is a dangerous place. It is always moving. So it's hard to know where you are. People get lost in the desert. In the desert, there's almost no water. So people get thirsty, and they can die if they get no water to drink. Very little grows in the desert, so there's not much to eat. During the day, the desert is hot. The sun scorches your skin. At night, the desert's really cold. When the wind blows, the sand stings when it hits your skin. People must wear lots of clothes to protect themselves from that scorching sun and the blowing sand. The desert is a dangerous place. people only go there if they have to. Well, after the great flood, the animals of the world went out to all the four corners of the earth to fill it with new life again. And people came out. The animals kind of stayed close to the rivers, and the people joined together in villages and then cities. One of the greatest and most ancient of those cities was called Ur. Now in Ur, the people of Ur thought there was a God for every tree, rock, and flower. There's a God for the sky, the clouds, the rain, and the earth. The world was alive with gods. But there was one family that thought that all of God was in every place. And Abram and Sarai were part of that family. Well, it came time for Abram and Sarai to move to a new place. They wondered if God would be there in the new place. So they wondered what the new place would be like. Well, they set out. Even the old people and children and their family went with them. And they set out. They stayed in their tents at night. During the day, they followed the great river called the Euphrates. It showed them the way, and it gave them and their animals water to drink. Well, it was a very long trip. It was a difficult, long trip. Finally, they started seeing people come out of Haran. People coming out to Haran. So Abram and Sarai knew they were close. And they're close, and they're getting there, and now they're there. Yay! They're in Haran. And in Haran, sometimes Abram would go out to the edge of the desert, look out across the desert, look up into the sky, and in those special moments, God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God, that he knew what God wanted them to do. God was telling Abram that he and Sarai and everybody were supposed to set out and go to yet another new place. Well, they did what God directed, and they headed out to the west, leaving Haran. They went with their tents, their sheep, all their helpers, and even Abram's brother's son, Lot, went with them. This time, they did not have a great river to follow. They didn't have a great river to show them the way or give them water to drink. Well, eventually they came to a place called Shechem. And Abram went out to a hill and prayed and found that God was there. So God was there. So Abram built an altar for God. Well, they continued on. And they got to a place called Bethel. And Abram climbed up a little hill, prayed to God, and God was there too. So Abram built God an altar. Oops. God was not just here or there. God really was every place and everywhere. Well, they kept going. And finally, they got to a place near Canaan called the Oaks of Mamre, and they settled there. Set up their tents and made their home. Well, one night, Abram went out to the edge and looked up into the starry sky. And in that special moment, God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God, that Abram knew what God wanted him to do and what was going to happen. God told Abram that he was going to become the father of a great family, and Sarai was going to become the mother. And the great family would number more than the stars in the sky or grains of sand in the desert. Well, Abram laughed because he and Sarai were old, and that seemed completely impossible that they would be the father and mother of a great family. Abram couldn't believe it. Well, God told him again, and God asked him to change their names. So Abram became Abraham, and Sarai became Sarah. Well, one day, 3 strangers came out of the desert and up to their tent. Abraham invited them in. Sarah measured 3 measures of flour, which is a lot, and she got milk and water and meat and bread, as was the custom, and they ate together. And the 3 strangers told Abraham and Sarah that they would be the mother and father of a great family that would number more than the stars in the sky or the grains of sand in the desert. Abraham laughed. Sarah was over by the edge of the tent, and she laughed. It just seemed too impossible. They laughed. Well, the 3 strangers went away. And you know what happened? They had a son. Sarah and Abraham had a child. They had a son. And they laughed. They were so joyful. They had a son. They couldn't believe it, but they had a son. And they named their son Isaac, which in their language means laughter. Well, Isaac grew and grew and grew and grew up, and when he was grown, old Sarah died. It was very sad. And they buried her in a cave near the oaks. Well, Abraham was very sad. He missed Sarah very much. It was really sad. But there was one thing left for Abraham to do. Abraham sent his most trusted helper back to the land of their people to find Isaac a wife. So the trusted helper went back past Bethel, past Shechem. Now the helper's at a well, getting himself and his animals some water. Well, Rebecca was there too. Rebecca helped get the helper water for himself and water for his animals. Rebecca was as courageous as she was kind. And she invited the helper home with her. So they went to Rebecca's home. And the helper told Rebecca and the family all about the great family, all about Isaac and Abraham and Sarah. Well, Rebecca wanted to be part of that great family. So she and the helper went back across the desert, past Shechem, past Bethel, and then Isaac saw Rebecca coming, and they met each other, and they got to know each other, and fell in love with each other, and were married. Yay. Well, now old Abraham was very old and full of years, and he passed away. And he was buried in a cave with Sarah by the oaks. Well, life continued, and Isaac and Rebekah had children, and those children had children, and those children had children, and finally your grandparents had children, and your parents had children, of course, and now you are part of that great family that numbers more than the stars in the sky, the grains of sand in the desert. You're part of that great family. So, let's wonder a little. I wonder what part of the story you like best. I wonder what part of the story we might be able to leave out and have all the story we need. I wonder if you see yourself in the story anywhere. So I wonder. Maybe talk it over at home. I'm looking forward when we can talk things over together ourselves. But in the meantime, talk it over at home. And there's our story. So we're going to put it back. We'll put the helper and Rebecca and Isaac back in the basket. We have to get Sarah and Abraham, put them carefully in the basket, and the altars in Bethel and Shechem get carefully put away. Haran, this little block that represents Haran, gets put away. This little block that represents gets put away. And then this that represents the great river, put that away. And we'll say goodbye for now to our sacred desert. Well, peace to you and joy to you, and we miss you, and we'll be together again soon. So in the meantime, find lots of joy, enjoy things, and know that things will get back to normal. So peace.